Hey everybody out there, happy Friday, and welcome to this week's edition of the Friday Five. If I had a nickel for every time I said that, well, I'd have a lot of nickels. But this week on the Friday Five, we are talking about budgeting and planning for your trip. There's a lot to do when you're planning your trip, buying your bag and making your itinerary and health insurance and all that kind of stuff. But something that's really important is planning your budget and how much you can afford to spend on your trip. So this week on the Friday Five, it's 5 tips to help you build your budget. Here we go.
5!
One of the first things to work into your budget is how much you can spend on accommodation per night. Room costs are going to change depending on what country or continent or city you're in. It's a lot cheaper in Asia than it is in Europe. It's also going to change depending on whether you're traveling by yourself, with 2 people, 1 other person, whether you're staying in hostels, camping, or staying in fancy hotels. So you need to factor in how much you can afford each night to put your head down on a bed.
4!
One of your next biggest expenses, food. You're going to do a lot of eating over the course of your trip, so you need to figure out how much you can spend on food each day. Again, depending on where you are, food is going to cost less or more than it does at home. It might actually cost more than it is at home because you can't always cook for yourself when you're staying in hostels and all sorts of random places. But places like Asia, it's actually cheaper to buy food off the street than it is to cook food yourself. So you need to factor in how much you can spend on putting food in your belly.
3!
One of the biggest expenses you're going to have on your trip is transportation. In fact, for me, it's 1/3 of my entire budget. So you need to figure out how much are you going to be flying from point A to point B. Are you going to take the bus? Are you going to take trains, a boat? There's lots of different modes of transportation, and some will take longer, some will take shorter periods of time, but then some are more expensive and some are much cheaper. A bus in India, $1 for 6 hours, whereas a flight for an hour might be $300. When it comes to flights, a recommendation I'd like to give you is, if you think you're going to be somewhere from January to February, you can actually look now what those flights cost from January to February. And what I did is I actually made a list of how much I could spend on each flight throughout my trip. That way, when I'm, in the middle of India trying to book a flight from India to Turkey, I'm not trying to figure out what the best price is. As long as I'm below that budget number, I'm good to go.
2!
Another important thing that you need to work into your budget is enjoyment and doing things. When you're on a trip, you want to go to museums and do some sightseeing, visit temples and whatnot. So it's good to have some money set aside and know how much you can see and how much you can spend on tickets and whatnot. For myself, I gave myself about $500 per month, which actually doesn't sound like that much, but it's worked out just fine because there's days where you are, in transit. You're on a bus for 12 hours. Well, you're not spending your enjoyment money, you're spending your transportation money that day. And then you have $15 to put somewhere else. So factor in some money for the experience.
1!
And the last section for budgeting is other. There's lots of little things that you don't expect. So there's visas, and there's taxis, and I guess that could be transportation, but there's visas, and there's when you get ripped off, there's just other random costs that happen, and exchanging money. You lose some money when you exchange money. Bank fees. Well, that's all I can think of right now. But there's other fees that you should have some just extra money aside so that when those costs come, you're not stressing out because you are going to run out of money. And that's your Friday Five. 5 ways or sections to help you build your budget for your trip. Now, when you put your budget together, once you have all those sections, okay, so how much a room is going to cost per night and how much you can afford for food each day, you want to multiply the number of days of your trip against those numbers. What might happen to you, like it did happen to me, you might come up with a number that is much larger than the amount of money you have for your trip. So when this happens, you can do one of two things, or both things. You can find a way to decrease your budget, so spending more time in cheaper countries, taking less flights, which usually eat up a lot of your budget, or you can find a way to get more money to supplement your budget, whether it's canceling cable, quitting smoking, staying locked up in your house for 6 months before you leave, which maybe I did. And that will help bring your budget together. Then take all of those numbers and put them into an Excel sheet and just save them on a file and put them in your email, and if you're bringing a laptop with you, put it in there. That way you can always reference, see where you're at, and yeah. Did that help at all? I hope it did. I feel like I'm going to have lots of questions under this video. If you do, please leave them or send them directly to me. I would be happy to answer. I'm also going to include a link below this video to a budget made by Dave from Go Backpacking. His entire trip, he put together a budget, all of his expenses of his entire trip, so that other travelers could reference and see how much it costs to stay for a night in China or India or South Africa. So reference that if you're trying to figure out your own budget. I have my own budget coming. It's not on the site yet because I'm still traveling. But maybe when you're watching this 6 months later, it's already up. So check the links below if it exists. I'm going to wrap up this Friday 5 because it's going on forever. But plan your budget. It's going to help you not stress while you're on your trip so that you know how much money you have to keep you traveling for as long as possible. And I'll see you next Friday.